right, we got another episode of Intellectual Dummies, and here we're celebrating Pride Month, and we got a good discussion ahead of us. We got Tori Mansfield, and we got Keith Donovan. And like I said before on this podcast, when we have a subject, we're bringing on people that are not only interested in the subject, we want people that disagree with the subject, we want people that have written about it, read about it, whatever. So we got Tori Mansfield. You wrote a paper on transgenderism.
Yep, I took a seminar class, and we all had to pick an ethical issue, and we took the entire semester, and the whole semester was devoted to that ethical issue, and so an ethical dilemma. And I did the gender transition of minors with gender dysphoria.
Okay, all right.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So and then we got Keith, who I know you probably haven't read. I don't know.
Kind of done I would say just spontaneous research.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So basically, the reason why you're on is because not that we're going to disagree, but. But I think you'll definitely present the other side of the argument, which will be good, and maybe we're probably gonna have a lot of overlap as well.
Yeah.
Which is good. That's what we're here for.
100%. I mean, that's why I enjoy talking to you.
Yeah.
Over the years that we've known each other.
Exactly. I mean, we've known each other for probably almost 10 years now. Probably, honestly, probably more. Yeah. Probably more than that. But and it's funny because what got this episode going was because I texted you and I was like, listen, I don't have these conversations over text because things get lost in translation over text, and I couldn't tell you both how many friends that have either unfriended me or blocked me or whatever because things just get lost in translation over text. So I told myself I'm not having any more debates over text or messenger or anything, because when we're face to face, everyone's respectful, everybody knows the tonality, and everybody knows all the things. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start off by saying I fucking hate this month. I hate that. Yeah, no, I hate that my birthday's in June, and I hate that there's a bunch of gay flags everywhere. But I have noticed that there's definitely not as much as there was this year than there was the last couple of years. I remember I used to drive around and there was gay flags everywhere. And now it seems like I'm hard pressed to find one that hasn't just kind of always been there.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad about that. But I mean, mind you, I just want to throw it out there that I have no problem with gay people. There's goes without saying, have gay friends, have gay family members, have family members that I'm fairly certain go by they, them, and stuff like that. Although I disagree with that. You do you, that's fine.
Yeah.
I guess my biggest disagreement with all of this is how it's being shoved down everybody's throat. Because pride is, to me, although I'm not a religious person, a sin. I mean, the 7 deadly sins, whether you're religious or not, you read them all and you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. At least to a degree. And, I think these celebrations are very inappropriate. I think that the way now it's not the whole LGBTQ community, but it seems whether it's a small sect or we'll just call it a sect, they're very loud, and I think they're very dangerous to our culture. I think they're very dangerous to our children. I think they're very dangerous to our education system, and I do think that shit needs to be stopped. So I don't know if either one of you want to jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pride stuff, the pride parades, they've become very sexual. There's those hypersexualization element to it, which to me gives it a bad reputation. I think that the purpose of it, I know what you're saying with pride being one of the 7 deadly sins. I think it was originally supposed to help them have a little bit more self-esteem about themselves, because previously I think they thought themselves as, broken or wrong or something like that. And so but I think it's no longer really, I mean, I'm sure you're going to have people who are homophobic or don't like gay people. but I think for the most part, it's generally acceptable today.
Mm.
And in a lot of places, it's like it is a point of pride. Like it's actually better to be gay than straight, especially when you get younger
Mm.
to younger kids. That's the case, which I think indicates that something's wrong.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I don't think
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of like a social currency
it's
to a
like a
degree.
social contagion a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it poses the question if being gay is something that you're born with, or if it's something that can be kind of you can be kind of molded into it by the
Mm.
culture a little bit, or your friends. Yeah, it's that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah. You open up a lot of doors right there, but yeah.
I would have to ask you both: have you ever been to a pride parade?
Ye-
No, I have not. I've only seen videos.
Gotcha.
I was gonna say, unfortunately, yes, I have, and it was. I remember I was in the one in Boston a few years ago, and one thing that stuck out to me the most was I saw a gentleman walking down the street in a speedo and basically assless chaps. Now the law is in Massachusetts, so long as you have a string dental floss going down your butt crack, it's legal.
Gotcha.
You can do that.
That's
You
interesting.
know, so saw one of those guys walking down the street wearing his fucking hat and his whatever. But like I said, wearing something over his crotch and that was it. And I watched him walk down the street, and then I looked over across the street and there's a family eating lobster rolls.
Yeah,
A bunch of little children. And I turned to my girlfriend at the time and go, I said it loud so that the guy could hear me too. I go, that's fucking disgusting. And my girlfriend's like, yeah, that was that bad. Yeah. Yeah, I just I don't think that. Okay, let me rewind. I guess the way I break it down, at least for me, is I look at a gay person and a straight person.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference between a gay person and a straight person is how you like what you masturbate to, who you masturbate with,
your sexual attraction.
Yeah, and I don't want to know.
Yeah.
You like either you guys want to know how I like to jerk off. You want to go take a look at my fucking history on my computer. You know, like nobody wants to know that.
No one's shamed you on that. That's like being gay.
Yeah, but at the same time, if nobody knew how I like to jerk off, there'd be no reason. Like nobody, like for instance, I'm not. For example, if I was looking at weird shit on my computer, I don't fly a flag about it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's your perspective on what's weird, though, because you're a straight man, though, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Uncomfortable is starting to create like a fear to the extreme of things. I was at the Boston Pride Parade yesterday. I didn't see really any sexualization. There were people in like a Speedo or something like that, but I've been to plenty of beaches where that's a similar thing too, and there's family all around there. You don't see people not going to a beach just because someone's like revealing themselves a little bit more. I think it would be different if that person was going over to that family and like masturbating on them or something. Yeah. Then I could 100% agree with you. I think that's well above the line. But I saw a number of kids there, and it was just like a basic parade for me. I mean, there were people in drag to the extent where it wasn't like I've been to a drag show, like a drag show to the extreme, like in a gay club. I don't personally feel like that should be presented to kids. Yeah. Like kids, like adolescents, I think beyond that, in middle school, I was watching porn. So like I personally think that no matter what in society, you are getting that extreme sexualization. The indoctoring of kids to me is like a very big fear-mongering thing. And I think they've taken some isolated events and put it on the TV, and that's what you're seeing with certain things like that image that you displayed with the dildos in the background at the Pride Parade. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm just saying there's 330 million people in the United States, and I think that's a rare event from what I understand personally. I did not really see any situation in which kids were like being pushed into sexual situations at the parade yesterday. There was advocacy. There was like tents in which they were saying, hey, if you are confused about your gender, like it's okay. You know, you don't have to follow this colonial method of there being just a binary gender between male and female. In my personal experiences, I have a really close friend She's older, and she went to nanny these two kids, and she's very Irish Catholic, very like extremely, extremely conservative, I guess is probably the best way to say it. And one of those kids is trans. And the way that that happened was when they were born in a position where their genitals were not working right. They had a number of surgeries. And that's why eventually I think they kind of started their journey into not knowing what gender they are, because even with their sex, they had been kind of mutilated with. And so with that person started, what would you say, gender transitioning care, or I feel like you would have the language.
The gender transition of it's gender dysphoria.
I don't like that. I guess what I'm saying is like that person started their care to transitioning young.
Yeah.
And I definitely have some nervousness about that. I think that's really only in the extreme circumstances, like with this child's life. And they transitioned into a girl, and they've been nothing but happy. The thing that really sucks, and why I am for, to an extent, there being openness and like some slight education, depending on the age of there not just being two genders, is for people like that. This person got completely destroyed, went to a private school because in public school they were harassed so much because of everything that's going on in the news and whatnot, with the hate and the fear of there being people that might not be really like, labeling themselves as male or female and being non-binary. So I don't know, to me it's like there's a number of things that like really personally affect people, and I understand people's concerns, especially when it comes to children, but I just, in my experiences, feel like there's a lot of fear mongering because that sells. And you get these little snippets like we were just talking about. There's no long form like conversations. I personally, if we have this conversation again, I should have one of my friends here that is non-binary.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like I'm in the position to really talk for these people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would honestly, I would love that.
I just need to find someone that can keep their cool and have a conversation and like not be judgmental for people having different opinions, because that's the only way you get progress.
No, absolutely. Now you brought up, because what got this conversation started was something that I posted on Instagram, and so what I posted on Instagram was, it was a child-friendly drag show, and they were selling, I think it was penis-shaped lollipops or something like that.
Yeah.
And they said for adults only in the back. But I think we can all agree that whether or not it says for adults only or whatever it may be, penis-shaped things shouldn't be at a child-friendly parade or drag show, right? And you get that a lot. And I know you said that there's a lot of isolated incidents that make it seem like it's happening more than it should. I mean, it happened in Newburyport. It happened in Newton, where drag queens are twerking in front of kids and stuff. I mean, it's happening all over the country. And you got to think, like, if there's one drag queen, just to use that as an example, that's going to a middle school or a high school and dancing or reading or whatever it may be, that's hundreds, maybe thousands of kids that are going to look at that and think that that's okay. And I mean, to your, I know I'm a straight man. What's normal to me is what's normal to me and stuff like that. But I mean, as a society and as a civilization and as a culture, we have a culture that tells us our social norm, what our norms are, right? And that stuff is not normal. That shouldn't be a part of our culture, because it's detrimental. It's detrimental to our culture, because there's a lot we get into. You both brought up a lot of avenues I want to go down.
We got some time, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the reason why I think it's detrimental to our culture is, I always make this analogy with transgenderism, because it's probably the most extreme, but it also applies to also significant degrees in lesbian, gay, and the other communities that I probably couldn't pronounce, because there's like a million of them now.
You just go plus.
That's the plus.
They just do the plus. And take care of everyone else.
I mean, and I'll use the transgenderism example, is where, if a man comes out and says, I'm a woman now, right? Society says, yes, okay, yeah, we'll accept you as a woman. That's fine, right? But to me, that's the equivalent to a schizophrenic person saying, you hear that voice? Yeah, we hear that voice too. Yeah, no, you're fine. No, keep doing your thing. It's the suicide rates are, higher than Jews in Auschwitz, which is insane. Depression and anxiety. I think just in the lesbian and gay community. I guess we'll throw bisexual in there too, because I don't want to be ignorant and say it's all the same, but just take those three.
I understand.
It's like 250% higher. So it's like we shouldn't be advocating for this, or maybe advocating or celebrating this behavior that's detrimental to just people in general.
Yeah, like survival.
Yeah, survival.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned a lot about the kids. I'm interested, first off, what your beliefs are about gender. Like, what is gender to you?
It's a social construct. It was invented, or I wouldn't say there was like a particular time in which it was 100% solidified, because there was a person named like John Moore or something in the 1960s that was allegedly the person that really made it concrete in America. But prior to that, if you look at other cultures beyond like colonial cultures, gender, there are a number of different cultures in which gender is not binary. That they have like the people that would represent as male or represent as female, but they always have this middle ground in which people that do not identify in either way are respected and they're part of that society. It's a very big thing. When colonialism came down to Africa and whatnot, they pushed gender onto those different cultures. They thought that because as colonists that they were superior, that these other cultures could not distinguish their gender. They push those ideas on other different societies and whatnot. It's one of those things in which I feel like in a way it was a power kind of situation. Like if you look at back when slavery was a big thing in America, the way that some slaves would escape is by changing their gender, because it was such a thing for the colonists to have those ideas just cemented into their culture. So they would play trickery on them and just dress up as a female and go out into the fields and escape that way, whereas all the men were, doing more like concrete physical work. It's something that I think throughout history has kind of become a bigger and wider accepted thing, but it's interesting even in Italy how much more men are open to like leaning into their feminine side and whatnot, because in my perspective there's a yin and yang to all of us, and the people that would represent themselves as non-binary are a little bit more fluent in both sides of that, whereas people that represent themselves as male or female are very much leaning into their feminine or their masculine. And I think with the culture that we have today, like even in my experiences, I've always been, I watched Lifetime with my mom. I grew up hanging out with my mom a bunch. My dad was always at work, and he was just had a lot of anger issues, so I didn't like connect with him until later in life. And I think that's why I am more in touch with my feminine side. And I've been told that in numerous relationships. And when I grew up, I've always been kind of weird, and I was picked on a bunch as a kid. And I think that like kind of toxic masculinity that was pushed down on me like really had me ignore that. And it wasn't until I got into high school and really stopped giving a crap about what anyone thought that I started to kind of lean into more of my feminine side, did theater and such, and created music, wrote music, and just, I don't know, it's one of those things, emotional music, like sappy, not like, we're gonna get them, or like Against the Machine, like sappy love music, and it's something that I think if I didn't let go of what that like colonized mindset has kind of done over centuries to the United States and a number of other countries that have kind of adopted our practice, whether it was forced or they kind of wanted to get on the bandwagon because we're an extremely powerful nation and we have a lot of money that helps other nations if they get involved and accept our way of life. Things would be a lot different, very much so. But to me, it's something I guess I've always thought about, but I didn't really have the language to be able to define it. And with everything that's happened, with all of these culture wars that have come since Trump was elected, pretty much like in 2016, I'm not saying he was the one to do it, it's just when that time period started. It's something that I think has been very educational, but at the same time, with any kind of major change in the way that we look at how we define society, specifically gender, it can be very scary for people. It can be something that people don't want to make changes with. But there's a lot of fear mongering situations in the past that have proved wrong. For example, when we were kids growing up, you love video games. It was, oh, don't play Grand Theft Auto, or don't play, X shooting game. You're going to go up and just kill your whole family or do something dramatic. I didn't kill anyone. I don't think you have, and that was like a huge fear mongering thing, to the point where like Hillary Clinton was trying to pass bills against like Grand Theft Auto and other mature games and whatnot. It just seems like when people are focused on that, it just becomes like a way bigger thing than it was before. A number of those parents probably didn't look at those video games at all before turning on the news and finding out how evil they are. It's like the Satanic Panic back in the day with D&D. I don't know if you guys know anyone that plays Dungeons and Dragons, but the vibe from the people I know that play Dungeons and Dragons isn't that I'm worried that they're going to go and like steal my baby and sacrifice it or something. But that was what was being told on the news. That if you play D&D or if you play magic cards, that you're pretty much tributing your life to Satan. And it was just another fear mongering kind of example. And that's what I feel like is kind of happening with this. Don't get me wrong. I would love to hear about your paper. I'm definitely a little bit more, I don't know enough, and I think it's a very powerful subject when it comes to kids, especially before the teenage years, about taking those extreme steps, like the example I just talked to you guys about with my friend's nannied kid, I guess you would say. Because that example, to me, I 100% think that person should have went through that, Karen. I'm glad they did. And that person now in college is very happy. They're in their own body. They feel like they are themselves.
Yeah. So,
but when it comes to things being shoved down kids' throats and whatnot, I think that I can understand the nervousness to it. But when it comes to situations like, I'm never going to remember the actual bill's name, but the left will call it the Don't Say Gay bill. I can't remember what it's actually called. There's vague language in that really makes it hard for kids that have parents in the LGBTQ plus community feel accepted. If it was more regimented, the language, I could 100% get down with people from like, what is it, kindergarten to third grade or whatever the bill's based off of, not being taught how to use a dildo or anything. But from what I've read up on and seen, that's not the case. And maybe it happened in one or two classrooms, and that was like really spurred it. But in reality, it seems like the vague language of that bill is hurting more people than it's helping. Because these kids are getting ostracized just because they have two dads or two moms or whatnot. And one of my friends that passed away last year had two moms. He was the most amazing kid ever. Like, never threw anyone down, didn't try to indoctrinate children or anything like that. Like, just a really amazing dude.
Do people ostracize kids for having gay parents?
Yeah. I mean, so it's when you were mentioning how it's more accepted, I've found from talking to people at the bar last night, from talking to the girl that I'm dating now that represents as like non-binary, it's not that way at all. They have extremely hard lives, and that the person that I'm dating now just went down to a festival in Florida and got like ostracized a bunch because their hair is a little bit shorter. It's not feminine, it's like one of those things where people are so fearful that it turns into hate. And that's what's scary.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is legitimate fear, especially with kids. I don't believe in the gender ideology. I believe it's an actual lie.
Okay.
Because I think that you're born in your sex. Like, you have your sex, and then, like, it's almost, I don't know if you're familiar with genotype versus phenotype.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the gender is like the phenotype of the sex, which is the genotype, right? So they're connected. You can't split them off. It's an expression. So gender is, you have your biology, and then it's expressed in the environment. And with all these different cultures all around the world, you're going to have different expressions.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it like you said, it's a social construct. So I'm confused by why people want to medically transition if it's if it's not like really real. I mean, if it's, I mean, and why would you have to transition? Like, why can't you just accept yourself as a feminine man or as a masculine woman? And when I did my research, it actually, there's a lot of causes for why people have, they want to switch gender, or there's gender dysphoria. For example, and there is homophobia, which is very interesting. It's connected to transphobia. Like there was one study that I came across. It was like 600 kids in like North Carolina. They did a study in high school. It was very diverse high school. And what they found was that the kids that were gender non-conforming, they received more homophobic insults, and they started questioning their gender in response. Now, if the gender ideology is wrong, then you're kind of leading people down the path of, I mean, embodying lies only contributes to more distress, more mental illness, and you're really leading them to, it might on the short term alleviate a lot of their distress, but in the long term, what you're setting them up for is a hell, because what they end up having to do is they end up, first of all, having to identify as the opposite sex. So there's like this split between you and your body, which naturally creates more mental issues. It's like neurosis. And then when you get to, and you have gender affirming care, that's mainstream. So when you go to the doctor and you talk to them about, you have, gender dysphoria, you're distressed about your body, and the gender that you're in, or the sex that you're in, they will affirm it. So they don't question it. Now, kids, they can be very confused about things. They don't really understand like basics of reality, like gravity, and like they believe in Santa Claus and stuff like that. And so, and you can actually show them they have very rudimentary understanding of gender at a very young age. Like if you cut off a girl's hair, she becomes a boy. So to take what a child says as truth, I think, is an error. And so what ends up happening is they affirm the child, and then when they get to puberty, it obviously magnifies because the body is going through more changes. And they suppress puberty for that reason, especially because for boys, if you go through puberty, it's going to be very hard to pass as a woman. So there's a lot of incentive to give them puberty blockers. The puberty blockers, the drug that they use, it's used off label, and it has been shown to give people like osteoporosis later in life, brain issues. Like it stunts your development. And an interesting case of Jazz Jennings, I don't know if you're familiar, who's I Am Jazz on TLC. So he's a classic example. He was identified, they identified him as trans at the age of 3. And
why? Is there any reasoning?
Because, so this is so interesting. There's so much to talk about. So Jazz presented himself as a very feminine, flamboyant little kid. And what you end up seeing sometimes, and I'm not saying this is the case all the time, but what you end up seeing is that the parents, especially the mothers, are very uncomfortable with seeing a gay, like a very flamboyant boy, because it's just, and so what makes them more, what an avenue that is presented to them is that it's not, you don't actually have a boy, you have a straight girl. So they feel more comfortable with it, and they're paraded as a hero. So so Jazz Jennings was set up for that by his parents, and then he got on puberty blockers at like 11 or 12, and then he got hormones soon after that, like estrogen and cross-sex hormones. And then he attempted to get a vaginoplasty. And it went horrible.
The same age?
No, like 18. Or I think it was younger than that because he was a celebrity or whatever.
Gotcha.
But he ended up having like a horrible issues because he had the genitals of a child. And they tried to, they castrated him. And so he's never experienced an orgasm in his life.
That's wild.
And he'll never.
That happens a lot.
And that's what they're doing to kids. They're castrating them. And then with the little girls, they're cutting off their breasts. And then you have to think, if in 80% of kids, if you just don't do anything, they end up becoming okay. They end up coming into their sex, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them end up being gay. So you interfere with that, and you make it less. So people are less likely to finally come into their body, and you're also setting them up for medical dependence for their entire life. They're made infertile, so they can't have a family, but they don't even have the wherewithal, the future thinking to even make these decisions, but we're allowing them to make these decisions. And this is mainstream. The gender affirmative care it's in Boston Children's Hospital.
Yeah,
It's everywhere. And yeah, I mean, like there's tons of health issues that come from it. And then if you ever detransition, I mean, there are so many things that you cannot get back.
Yeah,
I mean, for women, like the testosterone, your voice drops, never comes back. Never comes back. You get mutilated. Like, think about having like relationships later in life with a body that is like all mutilated from hormones. I mean, it warps your body in a lot of ways.
I know it's tough to find a different word than mutilated because it sounds like hyperbole, but that's exactly what it is.
And it's like bodily trauma. And I have a lot of respect for people who come out as detransition because they've had to forgive themselves in what they've done to their body, and they have to face so much backlash. I have all the respect for them, and they have a story to tell.
Now, when she asked you what you thought gender was a social construct, are you familiar with like Dr. Money?
Yeah, I think that's who I was quoting, like the 1960s, like John Money. Or whatever.
John Money. So that
he did some fucked up experience.
Well, that dude was like, for one, like a borderline pedophile.
Yeah.
And they actually did. They had the experiment that got him famous was with the twins. So it's the exact question that they had was, is gender a social construct? Can we raise this kid who had his penis mutilated at birth? Can we just raise him as a woman and see if it works? And I mean, and it didn't work. So I guess knowing that happened, do you still think that
it's an experiment with two people. It's not really a good groundbreaking science experiment.
Yeah, but I mean, for instance, this person,
thousands of people, like the study with 600 kids, I would say that's probably
but like for instance, so like if gender is a social construct, you can raise that kid as a woman, and that
depending on what the kid wants.
Yeah,
I mean, we were all raised in a straight environment.
Yeah.
I'm bi. That didn't work well. I know plenty of people that are gay that didn't work well in a straight environment. That's the most confusing thing to me is like people are going to do what they do. For me, it's just allowing people to be open and not shut down. Like the example that you said with some people that transitioned, if they didn't transition, that they sometimes would be gay. I know people that are gay that wish that they made that transition in life. I do think that it should happen as an adult, not as a kid, because I completely agree. I think kids don't know the gravity of their actions, and as a parent, sometimes you're on a big learning curve as well. So I can understand what you're saying there. I do definitely double down with some cases in which someone's intersex, or however you would say that they kind of have, in my mind, an exception to an extent. But I do think that if anything like that was to be done to a kid, should be something that would happen, be talked about and tested for years before they made those very extreme decisions and transitions.
It's Frankenstein. Like they're experimenting on kids.
Nowadays, I think it's come a long way from where it was, but I do think also that the people you're seeing making these transitions are very privileged. It's not a cheap thing. There was a trans person I met last night that was talking about how they haven't been able to do that they feel 100% wrong in this body, and they would very much like to get gender, I'm never going to remember the wording for it, but to make the decisions to go and change their privates, I guess would be the best way to say it. Their genitalia.
Yeah, I'm just curious why. And I'm also, it's so interesting to me because the whole born in the wrong body thing, it's a spiritual claim, which is very interesting because I don't think that's acknowledged much, because I don't know how you're born in the wrong body. You are your body. So a lot of times you want your ego to match up with reality. So if your ego has an identity that's in conflict with reality, you're going to have distress. And then if you have your culture telling you, oh, well, it's because you're in your wrong body, then they might think that.
Yeah.
And then they keep on going at it, and it keeps causing more and more distress. And so they want more surgeries. They want more people to validate them. Meanwhile, it's because it's a lie. Like they keep running. They're never going to be the. I mean, do you believe that someone like a man can become a woman?
I think with transitioning, with the surgeries that have come, I think eventually it's more about allowing that person to feel proper in their physical form. I do think it's a spiritual thing, but that kind of goes back to different cultures. Whereas like we are such a religious, like heaven and hell, spirituality is not really spirituality. It's there's a God, there's a deity, and it's very much constructed to pretty much fit either like an institution or a singular person or whatnot, like a cult or you know. I don't know. For me, in my experiences with talking to different people that have gone through transitions or talking to people that are gay that feel like they're in the wrong body, it seems like it's such a big thing to them that some of them have taken their lives over it. Like you were saying with the high suicide rates. So for me, the way things have been going are not working because we're watching these people take their own lives over it. If we were to be more open and accepting and pretty much allow ourselves to maybe even just consider that gender is a construct. Because I 100% believe with you with sex being a male or female thing. That's science. That's 100% science. Gender came way down the line after we...
To sex. I mean, you can't get gender without sex. I mean, it's an expression of your sex.
To an extent. I mean, that's...
It's an expression of biology.
To you or to me?
No. Expression of your biology with like your environment, like it's an interaction.
I mean, so gender roles, you're saying, is a science thing that like
gender roles are. I mean, I think
that has
that
to do with gender, though, right?
Well, yes, and they probably emerged for sex-based, like based on what we were, the demands and the incentives that we had when we were in rougher times. Absolutely,
yeah. It's a past thing, though, right? Like
what's
now, it's a past thing. Though,
oh no,
now,
I actually
right?
don't think it is. I don't think it is actually at all. I think we need men to protect us. Like that gender role is there to stay. If like you have your lawyer, you have your police officers, you have your firefighters. I mean, you have your military men. Everyone who's coming to save you is going to be a man. And so there are certain gender roles that are just, and like with being a mom and being a woman, like embracing that mothering role is beneficial to the child. And so I do think that there is still a basis for gender roles.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can tell, I disagree with that. I personally think if you look at history and wars that were fought, there were a number of women that were doing a man's job.
But that's an exception.
And protecting us.
Because like if shit were to hit the fan, are women going out there rebuilding society?
I would hope so. Why
I mean,
not?
I think it's unrealistic. I think you're gonna find men doing it.
Why is that?
Because men are the hunters and they're the warriors by far.
But if you look at other cultures, that's not so. Like
in what culture?
What's the name of the tribe up in Maine? A number of indigenous cultures in which the women were sharing those responsibilities of caring for a child or going and bringing food on the plate and whatnot. Like the gender roles that were pushed upon us because of colonialism have really made, I mean, this is centuries and hundreds of years of just brainwashing, saying that a man is supposed to do this and a female is supposed to do that.
I mean, it's nature. It's not colonialism.
I mean, if I put you in the woods, you would be doing the same stuff as me to survive.
I mean, you would have a better shot, though.
Why?
Because you're a man. You can one punch, I'm dead by you.
I mean, I could be just as weak as you if you worked out.
That's not reality.
But that's an outlier.
Working out, doing the same course, yes, I would be able to get more muscle on me because that's how the male body works. But if we were both in the same spot, I don't understand why you wouldn't be able to climb a tree and get food or toss a boat.
You think? Now hold on. Let me just jump in here real quick. There's been that being said, if they worked out the same and stuff like that. I mean, you got your transgender athletes where
that I think we're on the same page with.
Well, that's kind of what we're talking about right now. It's the same thing. If we're talking about hunter gathering, I can fucking for lack of a better analogy, wrestle down that bear and get the food. Or like a woman my same weight can't do the same things that I do.
Why is that?
Biology.
I mean, yeah, biology. I mean,
But
I mean, look at the
You have
UFC.
2 hands and 2 feet.
Yeah, but
just
I
like
mean,
me.
but to the
When it comes to verse each other, yeah, I think the male's gonna win if they were both on the same.
Yeah,
regimen. But do I think I could fight China or some of these UFC athletes? No, I get my ass kicked. So would you.
well, what
That doesn't disprove the point.
yeah, I mean, because I'm kind of confused because it seems to be that like we're on the same page about the athletes and stuff,
Yeah.
running
I
faster,
definitely
punching,
don't
all
think
that
trans-
stuff. But all of that applies to war and hunter gathering as well. But you don't seem that it applies over here, but it applies over here. So in your mind, I guess what's the difference between those two things? Like men can run faster than a woman. I can run faster with very little exception than any woman my weight.
Gotcha.
You know, so I can chase that goose.
Gotcha,
You know,
gotcha.
a guy is 99% of the time going to be better at physical activity and stuff like that, which is why it's reserved for that. But also, that being said, you know, when it comes to cultures and stuff like that, I just got done doing this book. It's called The End of Gender, and by Deborah So. Very good. She's on Joe Rogan's podcast. I would recommend it for either one of you. When we talk about these cultures, different cultures have different social norms. For instance, if what we consider feminine in our culture could be considered masculine in that culture.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
let's just take being, you know, pink as a feminine color. That's our culture, right? So a guy that likes, let's just say a guy that likes pink is gay, right? You go over to this culture, having pink is guys like pink over here.
Yeah.
You know, but to them it's masculine, right? But the gay people in that culture don't divert to that color. So in terms of like when you say like there's a lot of other cultures that the women do stuff that the men do, that's probably just the feminine part of their culture. And I don't think that's really evidence for that culture accepting these non-binary gay lesbian situations. I'm sure there are outlier cultures that absolutely do, but in terms of it being like a European colonialism thing, I don't think that there's a lot of strong evidence for that.
For me, I think you just nailed it. You're saying it's a social construct. So if you're in the United States, socially, pink is a feminine color. If you're someone else, you're saying pink is
but that's
color.
not. So we're talking. I mean, you said gender is a social construct. I'm talking about what our culture defines as feminine and masculine is different. So those are two different things.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think it stems from gender, though, and having that like defined. Like pretty much a male is 100% this and female is 100% that. I don't know.
In terms of what, like biology, or
starts that way. Biology for me is
what are you
sex.
measuring right now when you say that?
Biology for me is the sex of the person.
Okay.
Gender is what that person identifies as, and I think that physically, it is something that we've watched change over the years. For example, in the 1500s, guys used to wear high heels in Europe. You know, it wasn't even until the 1940s that you watched kids actually. Blue was a masculine color. Pink, like you were saying, was a feminine color.
So to that,
this has forever changed throughout our
So
society.
to that example, that doesn't mean that's not evidence for back then they accept, you know, things were gayer back then or gayer in that culture if men wore high heels. That's just the way things were in that particular culture at that time.
But now you would say that's a feminine quality, right? If I come in here in high heels, so it has changed with society, socially.
Yeah.
So that's why I believe it's a social construct.
Yeah, but I think you're conflating two different things, though. Because I mean, you're conflating two different things. You're comparing gender being a social construct and actual things that are actually like cultural
gender roles,
normals and stuff like that. Yeah, you can call them gender roles or what our culture deems as masculine and feminine, whereas gender is biological. It's not subjective. It's, you know, it's very objective, whereas the cultural stuff is subjective.
Do you care if I look up gender and just see what the definition is?
Yeah, of course.
Because
yeah,
I think we're
by
just
all
both
means,
have
yeah.
different definitions.
Yeah,
of it, so
and I mean
some clarity.
yeah, and I mean that being said, I think Socrates said that if we all agreed on our words and our definitions, there would be no debates.
Yeah,
you know.
So
you
I
know.
guess if you wanna, that's
Sure.
the
Let's see. Okay, so the male sex or female sex, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural difference rather than biological ones, or one of a range of other identities that do not correspond with the established idea. Yeah, okay, so I get that, but at the same time,
that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So I mean, that being said, though, you know, and I know I might dip a little bit into the rabbit hole on this, but you know, liberals change the definitions of words all the time. It was never traditionally that. That's a relatively new definition of the word. I mean, I'll even take it to.
Do you have a Webster dictionary?
What?
Can we go deeper? Do you have a Webster dictionary?
I don't. But
I do.
But,
in my house. So.
But for another example of this that I might do an episode on is fascism. Now look up fascism. We won't get into fascism, but I'm willing to say it has something to do with it being a right-wing ideology.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I guess that's the wiki, but it's going to say
right.
the same thing.
Fascism is a
it
far
is
right
defined
art, right? So like when you really know about like how governments work, how fascism works, and stuff like that. It's not a right-wing ideology, a single bit. It can come, for one, it can come from anywhere.
I think it's centered.
You know, it can come from anywhere. So
it.
That's why like I said, the liberals have changed the definitions of so many words. It's confusing everybody, and that's another reason why people can't a lot of the times agree on these conversations. But I mean, to the gender thing, I mean, that's a new thing. For the longest time, gender and sex were linked, if not synonyms, and then all of a sudden it's different, you know. And it's like, but when things are different, they, you know, when people start making shit up, things start not to make any sense. And that's kind of where we're at now. It's because like, oh well, you know, gender is a social construct. Well, okay, well, I guess I'm a cat now. And you might think
it goes as far as
it absolutely does.
That's another caremongering point.
Well, no, dude, they in school systems, and now there's a documentary called "What Is a Woman."
Yeah, I've listened to that.
Yeah, did you watch that
documentary?
That's how I know about more. Oh, Dr. Money?
I'm never gonna remember his name, right? No. But that's how I knew about him. Yeah. I got some stuff from that documentary. Yeah. Again, it's a very radical way of like.
But that's where that leads.
All I can do is like look at my own personal firsthand, like, you know, experiences. Yeah. I do the Big Brothers Big Sister program. I watch a 12-year-old, and I don't try to make our hangouts about this because that would not be right. But I have asked here and there, and he's never had anyone identify as a cat or have a litter box or anything. Like he's never been
kids absolutely do
into
it.
Being non-binary.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess for example, like there's so many people in our country that I think you could pick at a number of different things and have some radical examples. I definitely do not think a kid should have a litter box in the classroom. I think most people would say that unless you were to put that question in a way that someone's going to immediately be like, button down the hatches and be like, no, and deny everything you're saying without having any logic. And that's where we're at, in my opinion, on both sides, where people just climper down, put their walls up, and they just defend without having any background or facts on what they're saying. And for me personally, I'm always trying to go from firsthand experiences for the most part, you know? That's why, I mean, hopefully today, I'm trying my best every time I say something that I've only seen on TV or a documentary or whatever, I try to mention that it's not a firsthand experience, you know? That way, if maybe 6 months down the line we do this again, I continue to educate myself. I have different opinions, and you know, they're formed by those sources a lot of the times. But the firsthand experience is where I always stay pretty structured on. You know, like for example, what I was talking about.
But what about like statistics and stuff like that?
Statistics, I would say, is a huge thing too. That was one of the things I wanted to play audio on. Was just pretty much an investigative journalist talking about the difference in the rises of hate crime with the number of different and this is another broad thing, anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. And I think that's a very wide, broad paintbrush to paint all those laws. I have not looked at all of them, so I don't want to try to defend them or advocate for them. But I know that with those experiences, when they looked at the statistics from the FBI hate group, like it's all very much on the web. They have watched a significant rise in cases in the states that have passed that legislation. So whether that's a coincidence or not, it's kind of hard to tell. You have to look at those things on a very long time period to really put it to fact. But that is something that I learned from doing as much research as I could over the past 5 days or something like that. But I definitely feel like even in that definition, I would love to get an older dictionary because I can't really say if your opinion's right or if I'm right, until we look at an older. Because I 100% think from both sides there is some fascism going around. There is some name speak.
Absolutely.
And the whole let's throw out a bunch of bullshit to you is 100% a strategy to get us all bickering about ourselves. Why we watch the bigger issues that we should all be focused on, like the fact that 50% of the wealth in America is just into the top percent. There's a lot of bigger issues I think that should be talked about that affect everyone in a way larger way, and these are just social distractions. Very much so, because no one really cared as extremely about this until it was in the major news media.
Well, because they're asking you to validate their identity. It's like they're asking actions of you, which is very different. I think that's why it's talked about so much. Like if they just left people alone and didn't require them to say their pronouns, then it wouldn't. I don't think it would be that big of a deal. I don't think it would be that big of a deal if they weren't going after kids. If it was just adults, and I don't think they would. But I do want to just mention one thing, because I do believe that there are, I don't think it's a belief, I think it's a fact that there are fundamental differences between men and women, especially in terms of strength. And saying that there is no difference can bait women into hazard. It can make them think that, a situation, even thinking that a man is just as strong as you, it can set you up for dangerous situations.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I will, I guess, elaborate on what I was saying. I definitely don't think that women are stronger than men physically, very much so. I just think as a whole, again, with a large population, I think there are plenty of women that could do some of these male jobs. Could they do every job? No. But I think there are a number of jobs that don't require you to be in tip-top shape that a woman could easily do.
I 100% agree, but that's
100% be protectors, very much so.
Yes,
and
but I think for
men
a society,
can definitely be stay-at-home dads and have the same effect on kids, very much so. I've watched gay parents raise my buddy who I was just talking to you about.
I think if we had had female, a whole cast of female warriors, we would be screwed.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
I would say
if they were up against men.
Yeah, I would say in a war situation,
get
females versus men, the only thing that's really going to make that equal is modern war with guns. I mean, it's literally like a fact that women
you'd have to
shot.
You'd have to
women
even
snipers and sharpshooters.
You'd have to even the playing field with technology.
But if it was old school, swords and shit, I think they'd be fucked, because again, it goes back to biology. But with the sex of the person, that's why I don't feel like I think trans people should have their own sport. They should not be mixed at all. They should just have their own thing.
But then again, I guess I kind of agree. Maybe they should have their own category, but at the same time, the biological males are just going to smoke that. So we're just going to have two men's leagues.
It's between them. It's not stealing trophies from people that deserved it. It's like listening to. I'm so bad with names, but track star that was at the top of their game. They worked throughout their whole life. This female, and a trans person entered their competition and completely blew them out of the water. Was it? There's probably multiple.
Well, there was Riley Gaines and Leah Thomas. Leah Thomas was a dude and fucking smoked everybody.
Yeah.
And it's just
it's not fair.
With the whole making their own league, basically what it would boil down to is every woman that wants to be a man could only compete in the women's league, so they would just identify as a woman, and then we just have two biological male leagues.
Well, if you had your own trans league, and my idea how it would go would be everybody that is transitioning into a man would verse each other, everyone transitioning into a woman would
Oh, okay,
verse
so
each
there's
other.
a couple leagues.
So it would be fair, like
Yeah,
on a
okay.
biological
Yeah.
like level.
I really hope it's
Um,
not that many people that exist that
well,
are
that's-
trans that
yeah.
would have
It's the
leagues
thing
like
that
that.
aggravates me the most, and it goes back to my point that I've pretty much come back to every time is it's fear mongering. This is like literally like a few percent of the population.
No.
And I think if this wasn't pushed into the news so much, you wouldn't have as a number of people even having the conversation or trying to really like make it seem like it's the end of the world.
For children, it's like 70 times the normal rate
You're saying 70 times the normal rate
for
of
like
what
trans
they,
identity.
than before this,
Yes.
so these social issues
Yeah,
came up
yeah.
or whatnot.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what does that end up coming out to as a percentage of our children? In the
I
United
don't know.
States?
I don't know the specifics. I don't know the specifics of it, of the numbers. I did my
I don't
project.
either,
I did my
so.
project in 2018.
Okay.
And so it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's
It's
actually
probably
a lot.
more.
Oh, dramatic. Dramatic.
Because like right now, I think it's, what is it, Gen Z? I think it's Gen Z. 1 out of 5 people in Gen Z identify as some letter in the alphabet mafia.
Gotcha.
That's statistically improbable. Statistically improbable. So now you have 20% of kids saying that they're something when they're not. And is that, and I mean, like I said, this is the mental health implications and stuff like that, the suicide rates and stuff like that. We got 20% of kids. Is 20% of kids at risk? They're either at risk or they're just straight up lying narcissists. That's 20% of kids. Do you think that's fear mongering?
I personally think that if we didn't have this constant conversation in the news, you wouldn't see that high of an outcome.
Yeah, I don't think you would see that high of a number of kids that identify.
Yeah.
But actually, no, I'm going to backtrack on that. The reason why it's in the news, the way it's in the news, is because they're coming into your schools.
It's just fear mongering in my point.
You really?
Yeah.
You think so? Why?
Yeah. Because I just think the number of examples where that's happening is low. I mean, I personally do not have a large population in my life of children. The children that I do know are my cousins. Like I said, the person that I watch with Big Brother and Big Sister, they have not had drag time, story time in their school.
New York State is using taxpayer money to bring drag queens into schools.
Yeah.
You think that's okay?
I personally would like to see what that program looks like. Again, for me, drag is a very big thing. I don't know if you've ever been to a drag show, either of you. A drag show in a gay club is very sexualized. Someone that is
just drag queens
in
of
different clothing and it's appropriate, I could care less. Go ahead, read stories to my kids. I don't care. I think if anything, they should be accepted.
Yeah, I guess
that
that's
fear mongering is like really scary. But if it's sexualized in any way, I think most people that have children, and it's hard for the people that don't. You know, and I feel like that's why sometimes you have people with extreme opinions. My first example would be like, are there any children in your life? Would you want them to be around that? You know, it's got to be like a personable thing. Yeah. That's a lot of these issues to get anyone to even consider the other side or a difference in opinion. You need to like hit them at home, like in a personable situation, whether it's family, best friends, or someone that they have an extreme connection to.
So again, even if they're just reading books, they're dressed appropriately and they're super nice, do you think that's okay?
100%. I think that should happen.
The reason why I think it absolutely should not happen is because you're now bringing a man dressed as a woman, a gay man dressed as a woman into schools. That tells kids that that's okay, which in my opinion is absolutely not, given the rates of anxiety that gay people deal with. Like I said, you're putting these kids at risk for all these different things, promoting this behavior that leads to all these different things, and we're setting these kids up for failure.
That's because people aren't, they're staying with the cultural norms that have damaged
cultural
these people
norms
that have been trying to get
are important.
I think that they do a lot of damage to people, and unfortunately, you and I come from extreme privilege, so it'd be really hard for us to put ourselves in other people. Impossible for us to put ourselves in these people's shoes.
I think our imaginations are good. I think you can do it. I think you can empathize with people and imagine someone being in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, I personally think it's a really hard thing to do unless you're in it. Like personally, I can imagine, but imagination could be very false.
Do you think people can be confused that they can, humans are very self-deceptive, and also you can plant ideas in their head so that they might have an emotion and they come to a conclusion that's actually not true.
Yeah. I think that happens with the way that we're treating people that straight is the only way to do things. I mean, the whole acceptance of like gay marriage has only become a federal thing in the 2000. It's like a decade ago.
Yeah.
It's a very recent thing. Massachusetts was the first state to legalize it 20 years ago. It's only 2 decades ago.
Well, sexuality and transsexualism is different.
Yeah.
The trans, it's just way different than being gay.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different causes for becoming trans, especially when you're a kid. I mean, you could be molested as a little girl, and then you want to be a boy, and then you feel good by identifying as a boy, and so you have everyone around you saying, "Oh, you're doing better," as you're identifying with a boy, but really that's just setting her up for more and more distress. So, and there's just a trauma creates it, and then you have autogynephilia, you have homophobia that causes it, and so treating it as like a true thing when they have all these kind of causes, I don't think you're actually being kind to these people. I think you're being cruel. You're setting them up. You're again, it's that short-term appeasement. You're being nice to them in the short term, but really you're setting them up for a hell.
Yeah.
And I see that happen. And I think it's screwing with people's sexuality is a tragedy. And relationships are human. Like it's about like our human existence are so wrapped up in relationships, and so much is wrapped up in having a family too. And we're robbing bunches of kids. I mean, we need families to survive as a human species. So that's important. And it should be elevated over other things, in my opinion, because our survival is of the utmost importance.
To me, the world's extremely overpopulated. So I don't think that, in my way, if you want to look at it from like a biological perspective, when the world got to that point, I think that's in a way where that gene or where biologically people have kind of transitioned to not following that model. In a way, I almost feel like it's like an evolutionary response in a way. But regardless, that's just a theory. I have no scientific documentation on that or anything. But regardless, I think there are a lot of people that don't feel that the family structure is a thing. I've never wanted kids, ever. I do volunteer with kids. Like, I enjoy them. I've just never wanted a family. Yeah. I think there's a lot of other people that follow that model. And because we have had the family structure pushed down our throats primarily so that we can continue to consume and continue to live this capitalistic environment, it just seems like it's more of
I don't think it's capitalistic. It's for survival. I mean, you need a family to survive. That's what's best for the children. That's what's best for the future. Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely, we should be promoting families. We should be treating it as valuable. 100% as a society.
I don't think it's invaluable. Don't get me wrong. I just think that it's not an all type of thing. I think there's many examples of how people can have a life. I think that family structure has killed the dreams of a lot of females that would have rather gone out and done their own thing and focused on a career.
Yeah, but at the end of their life, the career is not going to fulfill them.
Depending on who you are.
I really don't. I think telling women that their fulfillment is in a career and not of having a family, giving life, like that to me, creating more love, that is setting them up for absolute tragedy. I mean, having kids is the greatest insurance that your life has meaning. And so much of being a woman, I mean, it's our biology. I mean, literally, you're built for it.
Yeah,
and so
superheroes.
And so I just think that saying that the career is just as fulfilling for women as kids, generally speaking, is the wrong message. I understand that there are women who do not have maternal instincts,
or can't have kids.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, my main perspective is I just think, again, society paints this as a must when it doesn't have to be a must.
So I did want to mention that
many people can have different ways of living their life and feeling fulfilled and giving love.
Well, it's interesting. Sorry, not to interrupt you, but I just wanted to mention one thing, because you said that we have a population issue. I know that we're experiencing a birth decline, actually, and that's what they're using. That's what they're using as like support for immigration.
Yeah.
So
that's a whole nother issue. That's scary.
Well, yeah, because you need people to survive. You need people to run the country.
Yeah.
And so
plenty of people to do that
in other areas of the world, in other ethnicities, and all these things. I mean, so I don't agree that we have a population issue, especially because it's human minds that help us resolve problems. And it's just going to be another human mind that helps us if we have a population issue. That's going to help us out. That's going to help us get out of it.
Right now, in my
we have
opinion,
technology. We have.
That's the scary part. I think is that we're in that. We're having major food shortages. We're watching a huge what do you call it, refugee crisis throughout the world. And in Europe, it's completely a madhouse. Very much so. I think right now we're watching it kind of happen in our situation. It's just one of those things that I think, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not really a thing I want to harp on the whole entire time. It's just an opinion in my mind. Yeah. It's something in which once we've reached that 9 billion mark, we do not have enough food to sustain more people.
But the refugee problem that's going on right now isn't because of population, it's because of war.
Well, it's war and it's climate.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not a population though.
Well, if they had less people, in my opinion, they would not have the same food shortage situations or have the same situations with how wars are created, where it's like a power dynamic. And I think when these countries had a significant less population, they had less problems overall. I think primarily for me and my experience with that thought, it's more the United States, in which we are. Was it 5 years from now, every 50 cents of our tax dollars out of the dollar is going to fulfilling our debt. And we do not have enough money to have any kind of situation where we're going to have a complete country. We're already in a spot where there's potholes everywhere. There's bridges that should not be driven over in major cities that are falling apart. There's a number of healthcare situations.
I mean, how is that all going to get paid for if the population's declining?
So right now we're in a spot where we're paying for all the boomers, right? Once that comes down, it will be easier kind of situation. But because we've had to pay out all that money to the boomers, unfortunately, financially, we're in a different spot. For example, when the boomers were our age, they were paying all the taxes for a lesser population, so there's extra money left over. So we're not going to see Social Security the way that our parents are. It's completely downhill after that. But this isn't really, again, the hill I really want to harp on. I just personally feel like the family structure that's been pushed on us is very much a colonial, or if you don't want to use that language, a very religious mindset, and it's not fit for everyone.
Yeah, because I'm
not saying that building a family isn't important. It's not detrimental to our survival. I just think that it's
I think you hit the nail on the head by calling it religious, because Jordan Peterson said it before, that the political has collapsed into the religious, and I do think that a lot of the disagreements across the aisle are fundamental beliefs about reality. And it is religious.
That's how we were. The country was created on a business, and religion. A number of religious people came over, the different major trading companies. Like the Dutch East Trading Company. I forget what the British one was. That's how kind of the Europeans left Europe. It was for money and resources and whatnot, and then the religious people kind of tailed along, because they were getting pushed out from, was it King James or whatever? That's why the Pilgrims came over.
Their religious beliefs created a great work ethic that allowed them to prosper.
Yeah, for white people.
Well, yeah, because that was the only people. I mean, that was their community. That was
a lot
Europe.
of indigenous people that I think.
Well, yeah, but we're talking about the people coming over to America.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're all white, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for me, it's more once they came over, they started to affect other people that were indigenous.
That's like constant though throughout the world history of like just other groups of people. I mean, that's a constant thing. So it's not particular to white people.
For me, it's just I would have hoped for a social dynamic that would have fit for everyone, not just white people. And I think that we would be in a completely different place right now.
Do you think we have that? I mean, we have one of the most tolerant societies that have ever existed ever.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, I definitely think we've come a long way, but it's been tiptoes, not strides whatsoever. I think there's a lot of things now that are extremely based in race all around us. It's just hard for us to see because we're white. I think that if you were in a group of minorities and you had the same conversation, you would get numerous examples. I've dated a couple different people from the different ethnicities, and I have never heard so much about race in my life. When I'm hanging out with my white friends, we barely talk about it. And that's because they are still experiencing racism. Like, it's in their life fluently, whether it's a financial thing, whether it's a everyday situation where they're feeling like they're being ostracized in certain examples, or completely stared down when they enter a certain spot.
So a lot of it's subjective, the perspective that it's going to be it's racism, what's happening to them.
I think that if you were to define racism, it would fit within those guidelines.
But you're mind reading.
No, well, that's from their word of mouth, I guess, very much so.
Again, I've also heard definitions of racism that I disagree with, I mean, and that's the thing is liberals change the definitions of words where black people can't be racist because they occupy a particular social class in society, and it's a power dynamic. Like, to me, that's bullshit, But I don't want to go too far down this road. We're kind of
we got a little bit off track.
Yeah. So let me reel us back to the subject. Is I mean, you use colonialism a lot, and how this family structure is colonialist. Am I?
Yeah, it's from the colonial era, like the
yeah,
start of
but
it.
I would.
Whether that be
I would make the argument. I would make the argument that 99% of cultures in the entire world, all throughout history, man, woman, and child. I don't think that's specifically a colonialist or European culture or value. I think that's just a human value.
What about in Africa when the tribe would raise the kid, or with?
Well, I think that's an outlier. I think that's an outlier. I'm sure you could find cultures like that, but like I said, I think 99% of the time, that's what you get.
So you don't think that's because we wiped out those people so that they are a minority?
No, because I think the Chinese do it. The Chinese have giant families.
Yeah. I'm not saying that it's just. I mean, also China was very much colonized at one point. The British took over.
Yeah, that was in the last couple of hundred years. But I mean, you look at all throughout history. I mean,
I can't.
Because here's the thing: is every country in the entire world, minus America, Thailand, and I think Japan, are the only countries that haven't been taken over by another culture at some point in time.
Yeah.
So, but as far as the family dynamic being I don't think that you're going to find a lot of evidence for a lot of homosexuality being accepted throughout time, or non-binary throughout time, and even in that One It Is a Woman documentary, although it's a little bit anecdotal, but he goes to one of the tribes in Africa, and again with liberals changing the definitions of words, they don't even know what the fucking woman is over here, and they go over there and they're like, yeah, but what if I said I'm a woman and stuff like that, and the indigenous tribes are like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. No, I don't think it's every indigenous tribe either. I just think when it comes down to it, as a whole, the colonial aspect has been very much pushed on us as a country in the United States, and if you looked at their values, we're very much still in that.
So the colonial. So
I'm not saying
when you say the colonial aspect, what do you mean? Like the values of a nuclear family and how we view gender and sex and stuff is specifically
race, sex, gender.
But specifically with what we're talking about, like gayness and stuff like that.
See, I disagree with you that throughout culture that hasn't been a thing, because in Greek and Roman cultures it was a very big thing.
Well, I'm not saying that it hasn't been a thing, but I'm saying that's more of an exception and not the rule.
I think it was just they were open to it. It wasn't a complete like, oh, that's different, I'm afraid of it type of deal. And I think that has very much come from religion and colonialism when we came over here. I just think that those values have been spread throughout the world. At one point, Britain owned, like they controlled like 80% of the world. You know, they had different colonizing settlements all over. It wasn't until like World War II where they completely consolidated because they overstretched their resources against the access and whatnot. You know, in a way, they still own the world. That's why London's such a big city. They just went into finances. They just control our money.
So I find it interesting. Like I'm curious how you gauge truth, because to me, like when I look at the nuclear family, and we have the nuclear family, and the thing is that it's very successful. It helps. It's like the child really benefits from it, and the development of the child benefits from it. And because of that, they're more capable. They're more able to engage in relationships and fulfill their goals. Compared to these tribes in Africa, I mean, these tribes in Africa, are they going to space?
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean. There's certain values that we have that clearly are close to true, because I mean, reality has rewarded us in a lot of ways. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, for me, I personally feel like it depends. I know a number of nuclear families that were split up from divorce, and because we value the nuclear family, those kids were ostracized. Again, it's not a end-all 100% thing for me. I think there's many ways to have success in a family structure, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a mom and a dad. And I've seen that play out in my own life. Do I think that all of those non-nuclear families are perfect? No, but that's the same with the nuclear family. To me, I know a lot of family structures in which horrible things happened, you know, where there was a number of like toxic situations, and if they were to just split up and be divorced, that toxicity wouldn't have been in the household as much, you know.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, because there's tons of information out there too about having a dad in the home. Having a dad in the home is huge.
Oh yeah,
so,
absolutely. For me, it's having a male. It doesn't even need to be the biological dad. It's having a strong male figure. For example, in my instance with my little one, I can talk about it because I put a name to him. His dad just took off to Georgia, started dating some girlfriend, ignored the rest of the family. So that's kind of with me. I've been trying my best to be a strong male figure for him over the couple of years that I've been doing this program. And it's been very beneficial. It seems like we really vibe well, and it seems like he's really taken to me from his mom. And then I also do a call once a month with the Big Brother, Big Sister advocate that we have for our pairing. And so it seems very successful. I just don't know if necessarily it needs to be the father. For example, my own dad, my last name's Donovan, should be Johnson. But my dad's dad was a complete alcoholic loser. That's literally how he puts it verbatim. And him and his two siblings changed their last name from Johnson to where my grandmother's second marriage was with Donovan. And that's why I have the last name I do now. I think that my dad benefited greatly by having that male figure in their life and whatnot. But on the other side of things, I'll go back to talking to my buddy who had two moms, and I thought that he had an amazing upbringing. Personally, I don't know anyone that's had two dads, so I don't want to speak for that, you know? And that I wish I could, because I know your opinion is there needs to be a feminine personality, that feminine have a better way of nurturing, and that it's extremely important. So that I do not have a rebuttal for. But I personally think different, but fact is fact. And like I said, for me, I guess I would say the strongest truth is firsthand experience, and I do not have that. But with Justin, I would say I've met both his moms. Justin passed away, so unfortunately I met them at his funeral. But and he passed away from a car accident. It wasn't suicide or anything emotional. He was doing amazing. He was actually the king, the King Richard's Fair, if you guys have ever gone down there. He did that for a number of years and was just doing really well. His band won this South Shore Music Award, yada yada. Anyway, very successful person, and I thought that really when it comes down to it, I think in some instances a family could raise a kid. But on the opposite side of things, I do know one orphan, and so not a great science experiment. It's one person. That person had an extremely tough time, and they are not a good person, honestly. And I think not having a family and having some kind of support structure that was throughout their life really screwed them, very much so. So I do think there's value. I just think when it's talked about, it should never be a concrete thing, because that makes people that aren't in that structure feel like they're failures.
I think that's fair.
And that comes back again to this whole thing with trans and with the LGBTQ plus community and kids, is that I guess I am 100% against the radical examples that we've talked about, that I have considered fear-mongering things. But I do think that there needs to be a course of acceptance. I do think that if we do this right, we will see those suicide rates go down, very much so. I think that it's something that I wish both people on radical sides could come together and make compromises, and then I think we would have a lot more success. We get all this bullshit off the news and the major media outlets, and we could actually make some progress with that. But I just don't know if that's ever going to happen unless we start having conversations like we're having now. And unfortunately, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure you've talked about to a number of people on the other side, if you wrote a paper about it, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, I don't know you very well, but I respect you, and I 100%
Of course.
have a lot of respect for Luke, you know, and it's just, it's unfortunate that some people go right to anger when they're trying to defend their point. And I think some of that's insecurity. That's why, again, I try my best to be like, I don't have 100%, like, I'm not standing on a concrete pedestal with my opinion on certain things. So I try to elaborate on that the best I can, and the only way to do that is long structure. Because if you were to take this and pick, and I'm not saying you, if anyone were to take this, like say any of the major news outlets take this discussion and put it in all these bullet points, it would just be bias, you know, to try to rile people up. And then, I mean, if you want to go for it, I'd probably find it funny because it's me and you. But like, as a whole, it sucks and it's destroying our society to be able to have like civil conversations and to be able. I mean, I learned some stuff from both you guys today, very much so. You know, and
it's
I
honest
appreciate the conversation.
Like,
very much so. It's just. It's tough, and hopefully we can come out of here and kind of share these ideas with other people. And if someone starts raising their voice, you know, be like, well, you pat them on the shoulder. Talk to me when you're ready.
Oh, exactly, exactly. But just to push back, so you said that, and correct me if I'm describing it wrong, is that the non-acceptance is the reason why the suicide rate is so high?
I think so, to an extent. I think right now there's not enough long data with all of these things that you have talked about and whatnot to really start picking at stuff as fact.
See, I think
but in the past, I would say that the suicide rates were high enough to be like, what's going on here? We should do something for these people that don't feel like they're in the right body, whether it's spiritually or, you know, just identifying as a whole.
Well, now, see, this is where... I guess we have a disagreement is I think the reason why the suicide rates are so high is because we're convincing all these kids of these falsehoods, and then when you're lying to kids, things don't make sense and they kill themselves. Now, I know you said they're not accepted and stuff like that, but it's Pride Month. There's flags everywhere. You know, so it's like they're the most accepted demographic in the entire in the country for the rest of the month, you know. So and then that being said, is back in the day when it wasn't accepted and you couldn't come out as trans or even come out as gay or lesbian, I want to see those astronomically high suicide rates, and they don't exist. They just don't exist.
100% exist if you looked at it.
But there would be. I'm not saying that people weren't killing themselves, but the suicide rate would be way higher back in, we'll call it the early 1900s, because among the gay community than it would now. You know, I mean, and I think that's why. I mean, I'll go back to the point. That's why we shouldn't celebrate it. That's why it doesn't belong in schools. And that's why you shouldn't fly a flag about it, because nobody gives a shit about how you like to jerk off.
I think personally, like, you 100% have the right to that opinion, but there's clearly a large group of people that do care about that and want to feel like they're accepted in society instead of scapegoated.
But
titled as perverts or pedophiles or whatnot. I think if you were to look at the history of Pride, there's been a ton of pushback. Like literally 2 years ago, Boston Pride got shut down because there was a number of pushback from like strong religious leaders and whatnot. I think it's
because it's promoting a lot of disgusting things. I mean, you have guys in Speedos shaking their dicks around. Like, We don't want to see that. Nobody cares.
I mean, there are
Yeah.
people that do, though.
But
and
there are
whatnot,
people that do, but then you can't complain when everyone's like, you're disgusting because you're shaking your dick around. Like, accept me.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm not going to accept you because you're shaking your dick around.
It's just weird to me because if you were to go on like the top 10 hits and watch the music videos, there's plenty of sexuality.
Yeah, I hate all that shit too.
It's just straight sexuality.
I hate all that stuff.
This is why I respect it. Because you're holding it down all the way through, you know?
Yeah.
But to me, if we're going to allow that, then we should be able to allow the other sexuality of things. Like,
I'm not saying that I guess it shouldn't be allowed, but it shouldn't be, hey, you know what? Have your parade, but it's not child friendly.
Yeah.
Dress up like a chick and whatever, get out of our schools. Dress up like a chick, you're not coming in my bathroom because you're a dude.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're a dude. And a statistic, now I looked this up a while ago and I didn't have time to look it up again. And not to say that, transgender people are pedophiles or whatever. I mean, but the amount of transgender people. Let me rewind. For one, it's weird how it's only guys dressing up like girls that are trying to do this. It's weird. Something to be said about that. The second thing is the percent. I forget what percent of transgender people end up going to prison, but I'm sure it's very low. It's a very small sect of them. But out of that small sect, 70% of them are in prison for sex crimes. And I think it's like 50 and I know it's at least 50. I'll probably get the numbers a little bit wrong, but I remember thinking that and being like, wow, that's fucking at least, I know it's more than half. I think it's 50 to 70. I think it's 70 for sex crimes. So, again, there's something to be said about that. It's like, and the way they're, I know you said that these videos, no, we didn't have any time for videos today.
That's okay. We had a good conversation.
Yeah, but it's like, I know you think it's fear mongering and it's an outlier, but like I said, dude, they did it in Newton, they did it in Newburyport. They're using tax money in states all around the country. They're putting kids on stripper poles. They're having kids dance on stripper poles while adults are throwing them dollar bills.
Yeah, that's no bueno.
That's not, to me, that's not fear mongering. It's happening enough where it's making the news, and every single week I see a different photo or a different story of a tranny shaking his ass cheeks in front of, and I'm talking about dressing provocatively. I can show you videos till the fucking sun goes down to that shit. And it's like, yeah, there might be one instance, but that one instance is 500 kids. Now, a funny story. I don't know if you've ever met my Indian friend Piali.
No.
Okay, well, we've had political disagreements, and she was kind of on the left argument, like, look, these people are just characters. It's like dressing up like a Disney character. Like, it's no big deal. Look at this. And she sent me a video. Now, she's from India, and she speaks good English, but she doesn't know all the slang.
Okay.
Right? So she sends me this video of a black transgender person dancing provocatively in front of kids, and she goes, "See, it's no big deal. It's like a Disney character." And I go, "His name is Jizz."
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, "What is Jizz?"
Oh no!
And I go, "Sperm, cum, splooge." And that person is dancing in front of children.
Yeah.
Even when it happened in Newton, I think it was last year when it happened in Newton, kids could cut class to go see this tranny drag queen, whatever. It's this fucking same umbrella. I don't give a shit. Cut class to go see this person dance. It was on Cooner. I listen to a lot of conservative radio in the morning because I like to start my day off angry. Cooner's crazy. Yeah. So Cooner had it, and then when a lady called in, and I was like, "This is the number to the school." I'm like, "I'm fucking."
Did you?
Oh, 100%.
What happened?
No, I forget if there was a big protest at the school. I forget if they ended up doing it, but there was a big protest at the school because we can't have kids thinking that that's an okay thing to do. You know, the LGBTQ community, on top of all the mental health issues that I mentioned before, rampant drug use, rampant promiscuity. You know, it's just you can't have kids thinking that that's okay. And I see videos of little kids that are like dancing dressed provocatively with these other drag queens. There's kids walking down a runway at a drag queen bar behind a sign that says "It ain't gonna lick itself."
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, dude, I could just show you so many. Like, to me, the evidence is overwhelming. We could sit here all day and I'll show you.
The formula is thrown
Yeah.
at you. Though,
Well,
because
hey, even if it's the algorithms, yeah, I mean, it is the algorithm because that's what I look at. But at the same time, it's not like I'm watching the same video over and over and over. Hundreds of videos all across the country, and every week there's a new one. You know, so it's like this is, to me, that's a very prominent issue, and you know, and it's not good for kids. To me, it's tantamount to child abuse, and you know, because I would have a problem if there was a fucking stripper, a woman stripper dancing in front of the children. I don't care if she's dressed fine, but these, I mean,
I think most people that have kids like that have they're in their kid's life, you know, and they're worried about them would have that opinion that you do. I don't know. I personally think that as things go forward, it would be interesting to see where that goes. You know?
Yeah. Well, they're shutting it down in a lot of states.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. And then it's how far do they go? Yeah. How big do they make those bills? Because I think it's a power struggle of compromise in a way, and I don't think any of that should be compromised on, because that is a dangerous slope, especially if you're in like an elementary school. Like the only way, and I don't even think it would be hard for me to get behind it at all, but if they're doing it at a high school, at least it would be like, all right, these kids are of sexual age. I knew a lot of people that lost their most people lost their virginity in high school that I knew. And so I guess I could kind of see that, but that's still inappropriate and not needed. What I did want to touch upon that you were saying is with the statistics that like 50 to 70% of trans people are charged for sex crimes. I would put that in the same perspective as how many more Black people are stopped in frisks and have drug crimes. It's a society, because these people are so scapegoated, the law enforcement is focused on that. And I actually have a personal story that I'm glad that it clicked with me. So one of my really good friends, growing up, I've known him since he was 13, transitioned, started wearing dresses and whatnot, has a kid, is married, has that nuclear family. And at one point, they were down at the skate park in Plymouth, and they were with their kid, skating around, whatever, wearing a dress, whatever, in my opinion. And so when they left the skate park, they were going back home, and they had like a 20-minute drive. They got pulled over like a few minutes later by state police. And someone called the state police saying that a transgender was stealing a child and kidnapping them. And so now my buddy, who's just trying to be themselves, they felt good in a dress. I could care less. They could wear whatever. To me, I would definitely feel a little different if they had a banana hammock or something on, you know, and they were at the skate park. Yeah, that's not cool. But like a dress, whatever, they're covered, you know, it's not sexualized in my opinion. And so when they had to deal with this interaction with the police, and their daughter's crying because their dad's being told that they're going to get arrested for kidnapping a kid, and their kid's in the back crying saying, "This is my dad, like, what are you doing?" It completely canceled them from having that openness, and now they are not wearing dresses anymore. So, I mean, I don't know if in your perspective that's right, because that kind of goes with that formal conservative aspect of a nuclear family and whatnot. But to me, that destroyed someone from being who they are. Their kid is still identifying as a girl. It's not like this situation has made their kid question what they are, you know, and what their gender might be different than like the norm or whatnot. So it's just interesting to me in that specific example how ostracization can really put people in difficult spots. And I feel like if we were more accepting, we wouldn't have cases like that. We wouldn't have these high percentages of people being thrown away for sex crimes. I think it would be a little bit different.
Yeah, so just to clarify, it wasn't 70% of transgender people. It was whatever percent of transgender people that do happen to go to prison.
Mm-hmm. For sex crimes, right?
Yeah, 70% of that chunk, not 70%.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, no, thank you. But yeah, regardless,
Mm.
kind of for me, that perspective would have to do with us watching higher percentages of like the minorities that are in there are charged for drug crimes more than anything
Well,
else.
yeah. So I guess a good question. I guess maybe we'll kind of wrap things up on this question. Is there's a bomb at an airport? Who are you searching first?
I would look at the cameras or whatnot. I wouldn't be searching Middle Eastern.
Don't have any cameras.
For me,
who are you searching first?
Probably the most suspicious looking person.
Not
by race.
Who is the just describe the most
someone that
person.
Looks extremely probably uncomfortable, like their body language and whatnot would really do that for me. But that's the thing that sucks with that is because we've put I can kind of I guess assume what you're saying is it's going to be some kind of bias on race or what people look like on a physical nature, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and to me, it sucks because of the environment we've created. And it's funny you mentioned this because I was just talking to someone who's their family's Persian. And so when 9/11 happened, they were getting the FBI called to their house. They were getting ostracized by their neighbors. He was getting ostracized in school, and that was all because of that. And that, to me, fed into it again when we had that Middle Eastern ban when 2016, 2017. You watch that racism happen again. And then we could back it up to the Vietnam War or during World War II with different groups getting ostracized as a whole. And they've lived there fucking like third generation Japanese or third generation Vietnamese, and they're still getting ostracized because there's a war over there and the government is telling everyone that the enemy is their race, you know? And so it just really creates extremely toxic environments. And that's what's unfortunate with the situation you're talking about if there was a bomb in the airport. Well, I would be surprised if me or you, clean shaven and like a white male or a white female would be getting checked for that. Yeah. Not be getting pulled out of the line.
Yeah, so just, do you want to answer the question?
What's the question?
The question is if there's a bomb threat at an airport, who are you going to search first?
Definitely not old ladies. Definitely not old grandpas. Probably not kids. I don't know. I mean, the default answer is like a military age man. Probably. I don't know. I mean, I guess the suspiciousness part would probably be a case. I don't know. You'd have to go with the statistics too. Like if someone is more knowledgeable of the statistics of people who commit terrorism and stuff, and we know that, then it makes sense that you would use your resources in a way that would be make sense. So like like of course they wouldn't really check me because like white women really don't commit a lot of violent crimes. You know what I mean? Like it'd be a waste of resources. You would look to ethnicities or like demographics that do that more than others.
Yeah. Well, that was my overall point, was kind of making a hyperbolic situation, and just my overall point is that certain demographics are more likely to commit certain crimes. You know, so it's like you have a room full of people and there's a dead guy on the floor. He got shot. It's a violent crime. There's a demographic you're looking for that. You know, if you're looking at pedophilia crimes and you got a room full of people and there's a transgender, it's probably that guy. You know, and you could just go down the list. But I guess that's my overall point. That sucks that happened to your friend.
Yeah. I just feel like those perspectives are why the prison system's inflated the way it is with minority groups and whatnot, is because there is like a very in tune bias, and those demographics that we're looking at, statistics we're looking at, is like centuries of racism. Very much so. If you look at the prison population, it's like 1 in 8 African Americans will go to like jail at one time.
Well, the only thing with that is that you can't ignore dead bodies. So with violent crime, those statistics are pretty like you can be a little bit more sure that they have some substance to them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that was it.
I think the crazy thing right now that never was accounted on a federal level is police homicide, like the shooting that has been happening and homicides that have happened with the police, you know. I am 100%.
Well, like police shooting people? Is that
yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And that not being documented on a federal level, and most states didn't do it until probably like maybe 10 years ago or so.
Yeah, well, it was until, what's his
Ferguson?
name? No, the guy before that.
Michael Brown?
No, that was Ferguson. They started doing that, like really counting them and keeping track. The guy in Florida.
Oh.
What's his name?
I know you're talking about the stand your ground law.
Yeah. So that guy that got off.
Shit, I forgot about
that's
that.
when they started. That's when they really started doing it.
You can see the guy.
Yeah, me too.
Now that Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
So that being said, and different topic for a different day, but when they started keeping track of that, when you look into the statistics, there's really nothing crazy going on there. There's really nothing crazy going on there. There was actually a black Harvard professor that just came out with the study because he was trying to find a disparity in police shootings.
Yeah.
And he did the study, came to a conclusion, and was like, no, this can't be fucking right. Because he's kind of like looking for his conclusion and didn't get it, which is police shoot black people more because they're black, right? He did the study, I think, at least 3 times over, combed through all the data 3 times, still came up the same thing, and he came and published his works. This was actually recently. This was a couple months ago.
I want to look this up. And crazy.
Yeah, and they pretty much they canceled him for not having the fucking thing. But
that's the roughest part about, like, I mean, we saw it on a huge level with COVID, and everybody was affected to that you could talk to, at least in America, it's like the fact that they would ignore science. Like, science is never supposed to be concrete. That's, for me, I very much try to always rely on science, but that's also why, I mean, I started this talk with saying my opinion fluctuates. I'm always growing. I'm always changing my opinion. And that's what I've learned from science. That's why I respect that, theory of life in a way. It's really interesting and scary. And I've seen that from like both sides. I think the left is definitely, I think it's because we have a left-wing administration that we're watching that censorship on an extreme. But it definitely, over the past 4 years, the censorship has been unreal.
Yeah,
like, I don't know if you follow Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, the Biden administration censored him.
Yeah, I know. The Biden administration, and the fact that people are going to ignore that is wild.
And
absolutely wild.
I'll end it with with this is that particular thing right there. Democrats censoring free speech. That's why they're the real fascists. And like and subscribe. Thank you very much if you've made it this far. I hope I offended you. I hope I made you laugh. And until next time.
Bye.